Hello there, my lovely sunwalkers. Welcome to another episode of Listening to the Voices in Our Heads. My name is Jenna O'Malley, and I am your soul writer. Today, we are joined by Vanessa Stephens, who is quite the versatile author. She writes everything from children's books to erotica, it seems. And we're going to sit down with her today to talk a little bit, like we always do with our guests, about their process and being a creative person in general. If you want to check out today's guest or anybody we mention or any information about me, of course, please go ahead and check down in the description box below. You can also find me, Jenna the Soul Writer, Jenna O'Malley, over on Facebook and Instagram, of course, at Jenna the Soul Writer. Um, if you're interested and you've been listening and hearing about things such as my in-person signings here or about my book launch for my second book, a part of the Arsena Forest Alliance, you're going to want to go over to my Facebook and Instagram for some update on some insightful but sad news. I won't leave it here, so just go ahead and enjoy this very inspiring and insightful podcast of Listening to the Voices in Our Heads with our guest, Vanessa Stephens. Let's rock it. Thank you, my lovely sunwalkers, for joining us on another episode of Listening to the Voices in Our Heads. My name is Jenna O'Malley, your soul writer. And who do we have with us today?
Vanessa Stephens.
And what type of books do you tend to write, my dear?
Well, I don't stick to one specific genre. I have an erotica book I co-wrote with my mom, a children's book that I wrote for my niece, and a family drama or suspense book that just came out in August.
Oh, wow. So you literally just got started. How, and that's quite the wide genres there. As far as your process for one versus another, just at a glance, I assume it's quite different.
Yes.
Okay, then. Now, were you um, publishing indie, self-published, or traditionally published?
Well, I was self-published at first, and then I got picked up by a small publishing company, and I had to pull all the self-publishing myself, and then they republished for me.
Oh, so did that include, like, what kind of changes that did that include? Is it as I hear even you have to not only depublish your books, but you even like your pen name changes. Is that true?
Well, I don't use a pen name.
Ah,
I use my full name.
so that might be a little bit different then. Then they didn't require you to alter that because it is your legal name, I assume.
Right.
That's actually a good tidbit there for any self-published or indie authors using your legal name. You might not go through what Jenna O'Malley might have to go through because I don't go by my legal name. I teach public school. I don't go by my legal name when it comes to writing. So as far as for you, um, how are the two experiences different? I mean, did you self-publish through just Amazon or Ingram or
Well, one of them I was through Amazon with two of them, and one of them I had put on Ingram right before I got picked up. But it helps that the publishing company picked me up because like I said, I have 3 books, and you have to pay per book to get on Ingram to get it
right?
at Barnes& and Nobles and places like that, so that kinda helps with them putting it out through Ingram. I don't have to pay that money each book.
And for those of you who don't know, I can attest as an indie going through that with 3 books, it's $50 a book.
Yes.
So, yes, Soul Writer isn't on Ingram yet because she doesn't have $150. But like you're saying, normally a traditionally published company would handle those costs. They absorb those costs as part of your contract normally, right?
Yes.
Okay. Um, would you say that your contract with your publisher allowed you more freedoms as an or as compared to an indie author? Like, what were the benefits of going trad versus staying indie?
It helps with being traditional because they help you get it on places like Ingram and things like that. You don't have to pay to do, but you still have to do basically all of your promoting and getting out there, and just like you will being an indie.
Now, do they give you training, coaching, assistance through any of that? For example, like, are you assigned here's a person you can learn social media marketing from better that works for them?
No, they don't do that, but if I have questions, I can contact them and they will answer my questions. But as of like setting me up with something, no, I have to do it all on my own.
So keep that in mind out there for my fellow indie people. A lot of us, and you having been indie, understand this. If you don't know a social media platform already, i.e., going from like I did, opening up only ever having a Facebook to also including something like Instagram, you still have there's a learning curve on both sides, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. There's help, but you're still doing the posting every day.
Yes.
And I think the key here is if you indie people want anyone to help with that, you need an assistant. And I would assume it's the same on your end. If you wanted help with that, you'd have to hire an assistant on your own dime,
Right.
basically.
Right.
So keep that in mind, my indies who are longing to be trad published and vice versa. Now, as far as your marketing tactics, like what you do routinely on the daily as you're posting, did that change at all when you went from self-published to trad?
Not really. It helps me though, because I have a really great PR team. I have a group of ladies that has stepped up and offered to help me try to get out there, get my name out there, get my books out there. That helps a lot. It would either be an indie or a trad. You've got to have your PR team, your own
You
PR team that's willing and wants to see you succeed and willing to get out there and hit the ground running to help you.
and I think the key term there is having that team really to give support,
Right.
because they're probably the people you're asking questions to more so than your editor or your publisher, it sounds like.
Yes, I run any kind of marketing ideas by them, get their opinion, because like I said, I have a great group of ladies and they hit the ground running, when I was mentioning that I needed some people to help me, they stepped up to the bat and they hit the ground running, and it helps. It really helps having that support system.
Yes. I'm kind of lonely islanding it. Not totally. I have my editor who's amazing and she does some marketing too through her business. And I have my marketing artist, and we're always co sharing stuff among the three of us, of course. But I can imagine where if you had someone who was dedicated only this is PR, they're probably giving you ideas that on our own we might not have ever thought of because that's what they do.
Yeah, they have given me quite a few. They have even contacted quite a few people that I never even thought of, and
You
because when
don't
you have to do it all on your own, you're trying to think of everything, but there is things you do forget and
This
don't.
is true. We're human, right?
Right.
So as far as did you find them when you went trad or beforehand then, just to clarify?
Whenever I went trad, that's when I started out, um, um, reaching out to them, and they happen to be really good friends of mine. They're like sisters to me, so that's an
Oh,
added.
that's definitely an added bonus because you probably spend a lot of time working on things together, I imagine.
Yes, a lot
So
of time.
definitely understood and appreciate that there. So, from your perspective, what are the pros and cons of being indie? Since that's where you started.
Um, the pros of being indie I would have to say would be you actually have more freedom over what you can do with your book. Say for instance, like if I want to do audiobook with my books, which I have been thinking about, I have to go through my publisher, and that extends my contract another 5 more years with them.
And the pool of who you get to pick from to do your audio recording might not even include, say, you have the one voice in mind. It might not include them or anyone like them, I imagine.
Right.
So you got to pick and choose a little bit. For you, though, as far as audiobook goes, do you think you would have gone audiobook so soon had you stayed indie then?
When I was indie, I was thinking about doing audiobook and starting to look into it. But it be a lot harder doing indie audiobook than through the publisher, because they have the means to go ahead and set it up, and they have their people they use, and so it would be quicker to go audiobook through trad than indie. But like I said, you have more freedom with indie than you do trad, because everything has to go through the publishing company. Like, I can't sell digital copies on my website. I have to go through the publishing company for that.
So, wow, that's interesting. As far as signed copies, can you do those through your website or do they have to purchase those through the publisher?
No, I can do signed copies. I set up my own book signings. Things like that I do have freedom on. They don't set up the book signings for me. I have to do that on my own.
That's a really good note because I know as an indie, it's harder when you're indie. I was just trying to get into book signings and literally they said you're not on Ingram yet. We have no clue who you are nor do we care. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
be on
"Oh,
you have to be on Ingram for most stores to accept, like, especially Barnes and Nobles. They have to be able to
yeah."
get the books, because when you sign it, like I just had one a couple weeks ago at Barnes and Nobles in Tupelo, Mississippi, and all the books have to go through their register, and then after they sell the books, then the people come over to you and get you to sign for them.
Yeah, that's the key. You don't see those royalties right away. You see them on your next royalty paycheck normally, or so, depending on processing times to the bank on their end. So that's a good thing for a lot of indie authors to keep in mind as well. Because I know I do like craft vendor shows, like say, for example, the one I'm doing at the end of the month, the local animal shelter said, "Hey, we're looking for local artists, so and so authors and whatnot come out for this festival." I can do stuff like that, but I can't go to bookstores yet. Now, the difference is I get my royalty checks that day as an indie because
Yeah.
I prepaid for all the books out of my own pocket. Therefore, they're paid for and I keep the change. That doesn't happen when you're trad. You got to wait for that paycheck to come in, don't you?
Yes, unless you do like festivals and stuff. Like the end of September, I have one in Luling, Louisiana, called the Alligator Festival coming up, and I'm going to take my books there and try to get out, that way through that area, and I get to keep all of the royalties from that.
Because you have to, you're prepaying the print cost.
Right.
Yeah, that's different. See, People who go indie and trad and vice versa need to read the fine print on those allowances big time for sure, because it could in the long run possibly have changed your marketing tactic, couldn't it? If they said we schedule all of these for you, that changes not only where you go, how often you go, but where you get to pick from to go again. Keep that in mind, my lovely sunwalkers. So cons of indie, other than you need to fight to be found.
Um, other than, having to fight to get out there and be known and stuff, it is a little more difficult being indie than trad because you do have more work to do on when you're getting out there. And with trad, they do a little bit for you, like get you on Ingram and things like that. But other than that, it's basically not really that much of a difference. Like I said, it does help because then you don't have to pay that $50 a book to get on Ingram, which everybody uses Ingram.
Yep. That's the big one out there. So the cons would probably still be the same between the two, i.e., you still got to edit, right? You still got to
Yeah,
deal with deadlines.
yeah.
Are your deadlines any different? That's a good question. Are your deadlines any different now that you're trad? Do they establish them or can you negotiate them?
Well, when they um send your book back to you for edits, they give you 2 weeks to do your edits and get it back to them.
Okay, let me back it up here a little bit because you said you wrote a child's book and an erotica book. Those are two vastly different books in size and content. They give you
Yes.
2 weeks regardless.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, that's a really good note to keep in mind because I know a couple of authors out there like yourself do straddle in multiple genres like that. So again, I guess it's a matter of pay attention to the fine print and see whether or not you can negotiate accordingly.
Well, I'm sure if I needed a little bit more time, I'm sure they would, give me another week or so. But I managed to be able to get my edits and get them done right within that time frame. So it wasn't a real big deal for me, like it would be maybe for some people. It just
Understood.
depends on how bad you want to, get your book published, how quickly you want it. Because once you go, it's basically like indie, if you want to get your book out there, you've got to put in the work and the dedication to getting it done as quickly as possible and
That's
as
true.
correctly as possible.
That's
Um,
true.
Traditional publishing, um, is the same way. How they set a specific date for your books to come out, but they could come out earlier than that date if you're on the ball and get your stuff done and get it back to them in a timely manner and things like that.
So it's not only just dependent on their guidelines and their contractual rules that you signed, it's also your determination. That's
Yeah.
definitely a good thing to point out. As far as the pros of traditional, what's your favorite then? Because it sounds like you're in some ways you enjoy traditional, but in other ways you liked indie more. I might be misunderstanding that.
No, you're understanding correctly. I do. I did like indie, because like I said, I can do whatever, whenever with my books, but with trad, I like it too because it helps out, like I said, with Ingram and things like that. And, it saves me money because I'd have to pay $150 to get all my books out on Ingram. And
Yeah.
that's $150 they're paying to save me.
Hmm. So they're
But
definitely benefiting you more so. Benefiting
yeah,
you for not just their sake, for your own sake, I guess is the way to word it.
yeah.
Um, Now, for your publisher, they took both. They took which books did they take? I'm trying to remember. You said earlier.
Well, first off, I had met an author in a group on Facebook, and she had helped me out a lot, giving me advice and helping me, with questions that I had when I was indie. And she sent me a message one day and told me about this publishing company that was taking submissions. So I sent in my children's book, Emily and the Magical Ferret. And I
Mm-hmm.
did let that I had a erotica book on Amazon, and they accepted my children's book and told me they would love to look at my erotica book. And then they accepted that one second. And then I sent in, because they get first dibs on whatever I write. As long as I'm
Right.
under contract with them, I send everything to them first that I write.
And that's
And
true in most publishing instances. You have to give them, I think it's called like right of first refusal or something like that.
yeah. And I sent in my third book, which is The Evil Inside, and they accepted it also, thank God, and which I have another one I'm waiting to hear back, which is the second one to my kids' book.
Ah, see, that's interesting. It seems like they're willingly letting you stay in both categories. That's interesting. Um, would you go back to indie, do you think, at any point?
Uh, well, really, honestly, it's too soon to decide that answer.
Fair enough.
I'm just getting started with them, but I signed a 2-year contract with them, so I'm with them for 2 years before I, can decide if I want to go back indie, which I feel is a sufficient amount of time to get a feel for the company, see, how well they're going to work on my behalf, or see if I'd be better off going back to indie.
That's an extremely wise point too, because I think some authors think 2 years is a long time to be locked into that. 2 years will be over before you know it. And I'm sure part of you is already realizing you've been with them for, it sounds like, a couple of months, and it sounds like time has literally flown by.
Yes, it has.
Um, do you have more control over your into what goes into the books? I'm talking content, especially since you mentioned erotica. Some stuff can get rather um not preferred by all readers, shall we say?
Yeah.
Are there certain things, like, does your publisher have a list that says we do not accept this?
No, I can put anything in my books, that any kind of content I want to put in there.
Really? It's like, okay, now I'm tempted to ask who your publisher is, but I know you probably can't say, so I won't. um, so definitely understand and appreciate it. The reason why I asked that question, I've had a couple of people who were both, and they were like, yeah, there were limitations on how crazy I could get. Again, psychological thrillers, that kind of thing. Um, as far as, did they tell you, here's your editor, or did they let you pick your editor?
No, they have their own editor. It goes to them, and then the editor gets back with me. Um they didn't give me a choice of editors I want, or say this is going to be your editor. I just got an email back from the editor one day saying, "Hey, I'm such and such, and I'm your editor, and this is the edits that I feel you should do." And she gave me good feedback on my books and stuff, told me her thoughts as a reader, and then she told me the edit part, where she wanted me to edit this or that. And
So she just didn't check your grammar. She also did developmental editing, i.e., wait a minute, you said this character wasn't there because, and yet they're in the next scene.
yeah, they checked all that for me.
So that's actually very wise. I think that traditional publishing, and that's a standard in traditional publishing that I don't think indie has adopted. Um, I'm an English teacher, so I'm sorry if I'm on my soapbox a little bit about this, but think if you go into Kindle Unlimited and look at a bunch of the ebooks in there, you have a very good chance of finding one that you clearly was a paper that was written the day before and not edited, if you know what I mean.
Uh,
So that I don't see that same in being true in trad, because those companies are putting money behind you. They want you to be to standard. Did you find that your books got stronger, or did they suffer any, meaning changed your tone of voice and things of that nature?
I I honestly believe my books got stronger after I published trad
Hmm.
because as an indie with limited income, I couldn't really hire an editor to go behind me and edit my books like the editor for the publishing company does.
I hear you. I pay out of pocket hundreds of dollars for my editor, and I know that I might not ever see that money back, but you're right. Even so, the work is better, it is stronger. Um, my editor is very good at pointing out to me my faults and how to teach me to improve them too. Do you find that's true from what you've experienced so far?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry, you cut out.
Sure. No, you're fine. I don't mind. The when you started working with an editor, did you notice that they were teaching you how to fix your own errors? Like, you always do A, B, and C. Here's how you fix them, so you don't do them anymore or as much.
Yeah, she basically helped me see where I was messing up when I had to do edits and things like that. So yeah, she uh she helped me a lot.
But she also teaches you to correct them so that they don't show up as much too, it sounds like. So that
Right,
sounds wonderful. Good editors are hard to come by. If you're indie, you need to save up and get a good editor. You
definitely.
get what you pay for too. Keep that in mind, lovely. So we're getting ready to wind on down and start wrapping up our questions here. Before we do you have any shout outs to anybody you're working with, or any book recommendations of other authors you've been reading lately?
Um yeah, I want to give a shout out to my PR team. Um I've got my friend that's like a sister to me, Vicky Drury, Jackie Newton, Lori White, and my blood sister, Kristen Polk. Without them, I know I couldn't get as far as I've gotten so far, and also my daughter and my son-in-law, Jamie Norris and Austin Norris, they helped a lot when I was doing indie with The Naughty Neighbor, which is my erotica book. They read and helped me edit and this and that. So they
And
helps me a good bit too. I want to thank all them people for being there for me and supporting me and helping me. And
it sounds like you do have a really solid team, and it's also, as a writer, I will admit, really good to it sounds like you have some male influences on your writing, and as a female writer, that's always welcome. Did you find that their input, were they yes men, or did they tell you when you were going too far? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
well, he pretty much liked everything I wrote, thought it was good. But if there was something that I could have done different to make it better, he would come to me. He calls me mom, and he'd say, "Mom,
Oh.
think you need to redo this part, maybe something like this. And, it's good the way it is, but it could be better this way, So that did help too, to have a man's point of view on it.
And we don't realize as female that some of the times the way we see the world, it may be a foot shorter than them. It's definitely a different view. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear you have such a wide support network. And I'm glad definitely that you're enjoying your journey. Did you have any questions for me today?
No, not really.
All right, then, my dear. Thank you so much for joining us today. I do hope I get to read your books here in the near future. And I do hope maybe you could join us again in the future, too.
I would love that.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and get us wound down here. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope everything goes great and take care of yourselves a little bit better each day, lovelies. Goodbye.